Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Welcome to Red and Blue. President Trump discussed his administration's planned expansion of Operation Legend this afternoon. That's the name of the plan to send additional federal officers into cities, even if those cities have not asked for and in some cases have explicitly said they do not want those federal officers. All of those cities are run by Democrats.
We will never defund the police. We will hire more great police. We want to make law enforcement stronger, not weaker. What cities are doing is absolute insanity. Many of the same politicians who want to slash resources for law enforcement have also declared that their cities are sanctuaries for criminal illegal aliens. In other words, after arresting illegal aliens for crimes, the police are ordered to release those criminals back onto the streets to continue their crime. My administration will be working to remove dangerous offenders sprung loose by these deadly policies and, frankly, by these deadly politicians. America must be a sanctuary for law-abiding citizens, not criminal aliens. My vision for America's cities could not be more different from the lawlessness being pushed by the extreme radical left. While others want to defund, defame, and abolish the police, I want to support and honor our great police.
The president is expected to hold another briefing tonight. Last night, he began by talking about the severity of the coronavirus pandemic and seemed to emphasize the gravity of the problem facing the country. But Mr. Trump offered contradictory statements minutes later while taking questions from reporters.
It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. Something I don't like saying about things, but that's the way it is. It's what we have. Well, the virus will disappear. It will disappear. And I say, if you can, use the mask. When you can, use the mask. I put on a mask. I have no problem with the masks. In theory, you don't need the mask. I'm getting used to the mask. And the reason is, think about patriotism. Maybe it is. It helps. It helps. Now, we have experts that have said in the recent past that masks aren't necessarily good to wear. You know that. But now they've changed their mind. The China virus is a vicious and dangerous illness.
If China were first in developing the vaccine, or even if it weren't, would the administration be willing to work with China to bring a successful Chinese vaccine to the U.S.?
Yeah, we're willing to work with anybody that's going to get us a good result.
Caitlin Huey-Burns and Tamara Keith join me now. Caitlin is our CBSN political reporter, and Tamara is a White House correspondent for NPR. She's also the co-host of the NPR Politics podcast. Welcome to you both. Great to have you both with us. Let me start with you, Tamara. Why is the administration sending additional federal officers into cities whose mayors have said they do not need and often have explicitly said they do not want these officers?
This is an extension of what the president has been talking about for about a month and a half, this law and order idea that he has been pushing very hard. It is clearly as much about his campaign as about anything else, because, of course, he has been talking about crime in cities since he was running for president, and he's been president for 3.5 years now. But law and order is a theme he keeps hitting. If you look at the ads that his campaign is running, and they've spent about more than $18 million, according to Ad Analytics, just this month, all on ads accusing former Vice President Joe Biden of wanting to defund the police. That's a false accusation. Biden says he doesn't want to defund the police, but Trump is putting himself out there, as you heard in his remarks, very clearly saying that he is against defunding the police, so much so that he wants to send federal officers into cities.
So to continue on your point, Tamara, the president frequently says protesters want to destroy suburbs, and as you mentioned, falsely claims Joe Biden wants to defund police departments. His campaign recently released this advertisement. Let's watch.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Crime will rise.
Caitlin, who is the president hoping he is speaking to with this message? And why does his campaign believe this is the right message to be sending?
The campaign wants to be targeting these suburban voters, particularly women. And the reason why is because when you look at recent polling and polling in battleground states, you're seeing that what is fueling Joe Biden's lead ahead of President Trump is that he is doing really well in the suburbs, and particularly among suburban women. We often talk about comparing this election to the election of 2016, and a lot of strategists say, well, you also have to consider the results of the 2018 midterms. And in those midterms, we saw that in the suburbs, particularly women, switched from Republican to Democratic. And that was a really notable and significant shift that we've seen continue on over the past couple of years, especially in light of the president's response to the coronavirus pandemic. The CBS News Battleground Tracker poll found that in states like Arizona, Florida, voters who were concerned about the president's handling of the coronavirus pandemic were supporting Biden or backing Biden at this point, and his lead was solidified because of his support among women. Now, what the president's campaign is doing in that ad is taking Biden's comments out of context. Biden, compared to other Democrats, has said that he does not favor defunding the police. Instead, he would like to reprioritize some of the funding, maybe move some funding away and towards different programs to be more helpful. And in an interview, he was talking about that. So that's kind of where those comments out of context have come from. But this is certainly a push from the Trump campaign to target those voters that they feel and see that they're losing.
Right. So, Caitlin, what is behind this suburban shift that polls are finding? You know, the suburbs were once a reliably Republican stronghold. What is fueling this?
Well, in 2018, the biggest reaction was the reaction to the president's rhetoric, and we saw that shift in 2018. And what's really interesting now, that what we're seeing in the suburbs in the wake of the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests across the country, a lot of those protests have been happening in suburban areas, in areas that are actually not as diverse, but where potential voters see racial inequity as a huge problem. And in our CBS poll a couple of months ago, we saw that shift in opinion about race relations in the United States. So that's something that is happening right now, and something that I think helps to account for that shift. And the president's press conference yesterday, I think, was a reflection of what we're seeing in those polls, a need to kind of change course in some way.
So, Tamara, let's dig into that briefing yesterday of the president's, because we did hear some of his statements on the coronavirus pandemic appear to contradict each other at times. You know, at some points he would say the virus would disappear, and then, you know, things would get worse before they get better. Do you think that the White House is having trouble crafting a message for Americans that, you know, Americans can realistically believe at this point?
Well, so you were playing clips of President Trump reading from prepared remarks and President Trump answering questions and speaking off the cuff. And he said different things in different times. You know, it's like we used to say there's teleprompter Trump and Twitter Trump. And there's an element of that. But also, he said something in his prepared remarks that I think was really telling. He said, we're working on a strategy. You know, it's 6 months into the pandemic, and the president felt the need to sort of show that he was in charge by going into the briefing room and holding that briefing, and he'll have another one today. And he said, we're developing a strategy. That that's pretty remarkable. I talked to various public health people about the president's briefing who said, you need to have a very consistent, clear, simple message to the public, because essentially the message is the American public needs to make sacrifices right now. And unless you have a very clear, concise message about that, people aren't going to know what to believe. And one example of this is President Trump in that briefing said that deaths are down 75% from mid-April. And yes, the number of deaths is down from the height of the deaths in April when everything was absolutely terrible. But what he didn't say is that the deaths have doubled. The daily death count has doubled just this month. And so in terms of trajectory, he was painting a picture of things getting better when, in fact, the trajectory is going in the opposite direction.
So, Tamara, is he responding to polls then that are showing that the public is largely dissatisfied with his handling of the pandemic? Is that what's leading to his current shaky ground with his messaging on the virus?
Well, certainly the polls are a problem. Also, don't underestimate the New York Times. The president reads the New York Times, and there was a story on the front page over the weekend that essentially said that he was abdicating responsibility for the pandemic. He said he was a wartime president, and then he looked for a way to not be in charge of leading the charge for the nation. And also, yes, his polls were much better. His approval rating was much better in mid-March at the very beginning when he came out and told the country that they needed to get together and make a sacrifice for the 15 days to slow the spread. Since then, he has sort of repeatedly undermined his administration's own policies on this and has gone back and forth. And the most recent was urging schools to reopen no matter what. And all of those actions and words don't poll as well. And Kellyanne Conway, his advisor, had even said to reporters, well, I think the public liked it when he was out there delivering information. So there he is. He's out there delivering information. But a big change is that he didn't have the doctors with him yesterday. He didn't have Dr. Birx. He didn't have Dr. Fauci. He was there with some charts and some prepared remarks, and he was the messenger. He's trying to show the public that he's in charge of this again.
He is in charge. All right. So, Caitlin, you have been examining some of President Trump's comments saying he may not accept the results of the election. What more can you tell us?
That's right. Over the weekend, in an interview with Fox News Sunday, the president was asked if he would accept the results of the election, and he said essentially that he's not ready to commit to doing that. And that is something that he also said in 2016 during a debate when asked the same question. So that kind of answer does a couple of different things. One, it puts a spotlight on the tradition in this country of a peaceful transition of power, but it also could suggest that protracted legal and political battles could be ahead. And this is significant because there is a lot of discussion within the states about how to conduct an election in a pandemic. And lots of states are planning to expand their absentee mail voting system and not requiring an excuse to vote by mail if you don't feel comfortable showing up at the polls. And the president and the president's reelection campaign has been consistently disparaging vote by mail, claiming without much evidence that it will lead to widespread fraud. And so it's significant that he made these comments over the weekend because they come against the backdrop of his questioning of how the elections are going to be conducted in November. So that has raised questions about whether he would challenge the results. And so election officials that I've spoken to in battleground states have said that they are preparing for this kind of onslaught of attacks, but they're also trying to warn the public that we may not have the results on election day because of the surge in mail-in ballots, because it will take a while to count those votes. I'm here in New York where there was a primary a month ago. They're still tallying up those ballots and those from that primary. So there are going to be windows of opportunity that election experts are concerned about, someone trying to kind of jump in and claim results either way. So that's something to watch for as we head into November.
There could be danger in that delay. All right. Well, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Tamara Keith, thanks to both of you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.